Young single dad took in lost twin girls for one night, unaware their father is a secret millionaire. To the young single father listening right now, before we continue, let this remind you. You are not drowning, you are learning to swim. You are not broken, you are rebuilding. You are not alone, and your sacrifice means everything. And for my wonderful viewers, your support, your presence, your shared humanity, it all matters here. You are part of this transformation too. The knock came at 11:30 p.m., sharp and desperate against Marcus Chen's apartment door. He paused mid-bite of his cold ramen noodles, the only dinner he could afford after paying for 3-year-old Emma's daycare. The sound came again, more urgent this time, cutting through the silence of his modest one-bedroom apartment in downtown Seattle. Marcus set down his fork with trembling hands. Late-night visitors in his building usually meant one of two things: police with bad news or landlords with eviction notices. Neither possibility did anything to calm his racing heart. He glanced toward the makeshift bedroom he'd created for Emma in the living room corner. Grateful, she was sleeping soundly behind the colorful curtain that served as her bedroom wall. Through the peephole, Marcus could see two figures in the dimly lit hallway. Young women, maybe 19 or 20, with identical faces streaked with tears and blonde hair disheveled from what looked like hours of distress. One clutched a small purse, while the other held what appeared to be a dead cell phone. Their expensive-looking clothes were wrinkled and their makeup smeared, as if they'd been crying for hours. "Please," came a voice through the door, soft but desperate. "We know it's late, but we really need help. We're lost and our phones are dead. We've been walking for hours and you're the first person whose light was still on." Marcus's practical mind immediately went to worst-case scenarios. He was a 24-year-old single father with barely enough money to keep the lights on and food on the table. Taking in strangers wasn't something he could afford to do, literally or figuratively. But something about the genuine desperation in that voice, the way it reminded him of his own moment of crisis 2 years ago when Emma's mother had walked out, made him pause. "What kind of help do you need?" he called through the door, keeping his voice low to avoid waking Emma. "Our car broke down about 5 miles from here," the second voice explained, nearly identical to the first. "We've been walking trying to find help, but everything is closed. We just need to use a phone to call someone to pick us up. We're not from Seattle, we don't know the area, and we're completely lost." Marcus studied their faces through the peephole again. They looked exhausted, scared and genuinely in distress. More importantly, they looked like they could be someone's daughters, lost and afraid in a city that could be dangerous for 2 young women alone at night. He thought about Emma, sleeping peacefully just a few feet away. What if, years from now, she was ever in a similar situation? What if she needed help from a stranger and everyone turned her away out of fear or inconvenience? Against every rational thought screaming in his head, Marcus slowly unlocked the door. "Come in," he said quietly, stepping aside to let them enter. "But please keep your voices down. My daughter is sleeping." The relief that washed over both girls' faces was so profound that Marcus felt his chest tighten with unexpected emotion. "Thank you," they whispered almost in unison, stepping into his small living space. "Thank you so much. We were starting to think we'd have to sleep on the street." As they entered his apartment, Marcus couldn't help but notice the stark contrast between his visitors and his surroundings. His furniture was mostly second-hand finds from Goodwill and garage sales. The carpet was worn thin in places, and he'd patched holes in the walls with careful applications of spackling compound that didn't quite match the paint. Everything about his home screamed struggling single father doing his best with very little. The girls, on the other hand, despite their disheveled state, clearly came from a different world. Their clothes, though wrinkled and tear-stained, were obviously expensive. Designer jeans, cashmere sweaters, leather boots that probably cost more than Marcus made in 2 weeks at his job loading trucks at the shipping warehouse. "I'm Marcus," he said, grabbing 2 bottles of water from his nearly empty refrigerator. "And you are?" "I'm Sophia," said the taller of the 2 twins, accepting the water like it was liquid gold. "And this is my sister Isabella. We can't thank you enough for letting us in. We know how this must look, 2 strangers showing up at your door in the middle of the night." "Everyone needs help sometimes," Marcus replied, settling into his threadbare armchair while the twins sat on his second-hand couch. "Where were you trying to get to?" Isabella wiped her eyes with a tissue Marcus had offered. "We were visiting colleges in the area. Our car broke down on the interstate and we've been walking ever since trying to find help. Everything is so spread out here compared to where we're from." "Where's home?" Marcus asked, genuinely curious about these 2 young women who seemed so out of place in his working-class neighborhood. "New York," Sophia answered quickly, then exchanged a glance with her sister that Marcus didn't quite understand. "We're between our sophomore and junior years at different colleges, just taking a road trip to check out graduate schools." Something about their story didn't quite add up, but Marcus had learned not to pry too deeply into other people's business. Everyone had their reasons for being vague about personal details, especially when they were in vulnerable situations. "The phone's in the kitchen if you want to try calling someone," he offered. Both twins tried their phones again first, but the devices remained frustratingly dead. When Sophia attempted to use Marcus's landline, she hung up after several minutes, with growing frustration. "The person we were supposed to stay with isn't answering," she said, her voice tight with worry. "And we don't have anyone else's number memorized. Everything was stored in our phones." Marcus felt that familiar tug of protective instinct that had defined his life since Emma was born. The same instinct that had driven him to work double shifts. When she had pneumonia last winter, that made him skip meals to ensure she had everything she needed. That had transformed him from a carefree college dropout into a responsible father, practically overnight. "Look," he said, the words coming out. Before he could second-guess himself, "It's almost midnight. Nothing's going to be open until morning anyway. You can sleep on my couch tonight, and we'll figure out getting you help in the morning." The twins looked at each other with expressions of surprise, hope, and something that looked almost like relief beyond what the situation warranted. "We couldn't impose like that," Isabella protested, but her tone suggested she desperately hoped he'd insist. "You're not imposing," Marcus assured them. "I have an extra blanket and pillow. It's not the Four Seasons, but it's safe and dry. And in the morning, I can drive you to wherever you need to go before I drop Emma off at daycare." As if summoned by the mention of her name, a small voice called out from behind the colorful curtain. "Daddy, who are you talking to?" Marcus smiled apologetically at the twins. "That's Emma. Hold on." He walked over to the curtain and peeked behind it to find his 3-year-old daughter sitting up in her toddler bed, rubbing sleepy eyes and clutching her favorite stuffed elephant. "Just some people who needed help, sweetheart," he said softly, kneeling beside her bed. "They're going to sleep on the couch tonight. Can you say a quiet hello and then go back to sleep?" Emma, with the fearless curiosity of a toddler, immediately wanted to meet the visitors. She padded out from behind her curtain in her favorite princess pajamas, elephant tucked under one arm, and studied the twins with the intense concentration only a 3-year-old could muster. "You look the same," she announced, her voice filled with wonder. Sophia and Isabella both smiled, and Marcus was struck by how their faces completely transformed with genuine joy. "We're twins," Sophia explained gently, crouching down to Emma's level. "That means we're sisters who were born on the same day and look very similar." "Like in my book!" Emma exclaimed, suddenly wide awake with excitement. She ran back behind her curtain and returned with a battered children's book about twin rabbits that Marcus had found at a library book sale. For the next 20 minutes, Marcus watched in amazement as his normally shy daughter completely opened up to the two strangers. The twins seemed genuinely delighted by her chatter, answering her endless questions with patience and enthusiasm that seemed far beyond their years. They admired her stuffed animal collection, listened intently to her explanation of why elephants were the best animals, and even helped her build a small fort out of couch cushions. "You're really good with kids," Marcus observed, as he finally convinced Emma to go back to bed. "We love children," Isabella said softly, her eyes following Emma as she disappeared behind her curtain. "We've always wanted to work with kids someday, maybe teaching or child development." As the night wore on, and Marcus made up the couch with his spare bedding, he found himself drawn into conversation with Sophia and Isabella in ways he hadn't experienced in months. Usually his interactions were limited to brief exchanges with Emma's daycare teachers, his supervisor at work, or the occasional small talk with neighbors. But these two young women asked thoughtful questions about his life, his dreams, his challenges as a single father. "How long have you been on your own?" Sophia asked gently, as Marcus made hot chocolate with the last packet of cocoa mix he'd been saving for a special occasion. 2 years, Marcus replied, stirring the steaming mugs with a sense of ceremony he hadn't felt in ages. Emma's mother left when Emma was 1, said she wasn't ready for the responsibility of parenthood and needed to find herself somewhere that didn't include diapers and 3 a.m. feedings. He hadn't meant to share such personal information, but something about the twins' gentle attention made the words flow easier than they had in years. "That must have been incredibly difficult," Isabella said, her voice full of genuine compassion. "Raising a child alone while you're still so young yourself." Marcus nodded, settling into his chair with his own mug. "It was terrifying at first. I was 22, working part-time at a pizza place, living in a studio apartment that wasn't suitable for a baby. I had no idea what I was doing, but Emma needed me to figure it out, so I did." "What do you do for work now?" Sophia asked, though her tone suggested she was more interested in Marcus as a person than in judging his circumstances. "I work at a shipping warehouse," Marcus said, trying to keep any defensiveness out of his voice. "Loading and unloading trucks, inventory management, that sort of thing. It's not glamorous, but it pays the bills, and the hours work with Emma's daycare schedule." "That's honest work," Isabella said firmly. "There's nothing to be ashamed of in providing for your family." Marcus felt something tight in his chest begin to loosen. When was the last time someone had spoken to him with such respect about his job? Most people his age were finishing college, starting careers, going out with friends. He was measuring his success by whether Emma had clean clothes and enough food, whether her daycare fees were paid on time, whether he could afford the occasional book or toy that made her face light up. "What do you want to do long-term?" Sophia asked, curling up on the couch with her hot chocolate dot. It was a question Marcus rarely allowed himself to consider. Long-term planning was a luxury he couldn't afford when he was focused on making it through each day, each week, each month. "I started community college before Emma was born," he admitted. "I was studying business administration, hoping to maybe start my own company someday. But when Emma's mother left," he shrugged, "survival became more important than dreams." "What kind of company?" Isabella pressed gently. Marcus felt heat rise in his cheeks. It seemed foolish now, sharing his abandoned dreams with these two polished young women who probably had trust funds and limitless possibilities ahead of them. "I wanted to start a logistics company," he said quietly, "something that helped small businesses with shipping and distribution." I worked at that pizza place for 3 years and watched the owner struggle with getting ingredients delivered efficiently and cost-effectively. I thought maybe I could build something that solved those kinds of problems for local businesses." The twins exchanged one of their meaningful glances again, but this time Marcus caught something different in their expression, something that looked almost like excitement. "That sounds like an amazing idea," Sophia said, leaning forward with genuine interest. "The logistics industry is huge, and there's always room for innovation, especially in helping small businesses compete with larger corporations." Marcus was surprised by how knowledgeable she sounded. "You know about logistics?" Isabella smiled. "We've learned a lot about business over the years. Our father is—" She paused, glancing at her sister. "He's taught us about various industries." As they talked deep into the night, Marcus found himself sharing dreams and ideas he hadn't spoken aloud in 2 years. The twins listened with an intensity that was both flattering and slightly puzzling. They asked intelligent questions about his business concepts, offered insights that seemed sophisticated beyond their apparent age, and encouraged him to think about possibilities he'd long since abandoned. "You know what strikes me about your story," Sophia said as they finally prepared for bed around 2 a.m. "You talk about survival versus dreams like they're opposite things. But everything you've done for Emma, every sacrifice you've made, every challenge you've overcome, that's not just survival. That's building something meaningful." "She's right," Isabella added, settling onto the couch with the extra blanket Marcus had provided. "You've created a stable, loving home for your daughter under incredibly difficult circumstances. You've adapted, learned, grown. Those are exactly the qualities that make successful entrepreneurs." Marcus felt tears prick his eyes, exhaustion and unexpected emotional support combining to overwhelm his usual defenses. "Thank you," he said simply. "Both of you. It's been a long time since anyone believed I was capable of more than just getting by." The next morning dawned bright and clear, and Marcus woke to the sound of Emma's delighted laughter coming from the kitchen. He found his daughter sitting at his small dining table, coloring in one of her books, while Sophia and Isabella prepared what looked like a feast from his meager pantry supplies. "We hope you don't mind," Isabella said, gesturing to the breakfast spread they'd somehow created. "We wanted to do something to thank you for your kindness last night." They had managed to transform his basic ingredients into something that looked like it belonged in a restaurant. French toast made from his day-old bread, eggs prepared in a way that made them look gourmet, and coffee that somehow tasted better than anything he'd managed to make with the same beans and machine. "This is incredible," Marcus said, genuinely amazed. "Where did you learn to cook like this?" "We've had some practice," Sophia said with a smile that seemed to hold secrets. "Our father believes in the importance of practical skills." As they ate breakfast together, Emma chattering happily about her new twin friends, Marcus felt a warmth in his small apartment that had been missing for far too long. The simple act of sharing a meal with people who seemed to genuinely care about him and Emma made his modest home feel rich in ways that had nothing to do with money. After breakfast, Marcus offered to drive the twins wherever they needed to go. They accepted, though he noticed they seemed reluctant to leave, spending extra time playing with Emma and asking detailed questions about Marcus's daily routine, his work schedule, his long-term goals. "Before we go," Isabella said as they prepared to leave, "we want you to have this." She pressed a business card into Marcus's hand. "It's our father's contact information. If you ever need anything at all, please don't hesitate to call." Marcus glanced at the card without really focusing on the details, too caught up in the strange sadness of saying goodbye to these two remarkable young women who had brought such unexpected joy into his world. "Thank you," he said, pocketing the card. "Take care of yourselves. I hope you find what you're looking for." As they drove toward the downtown area where the twins said they could meet their ride, Marcus found himself thinking about the previous night's conversations. For the first time in 2 years, he'd allowed himself to imagine possibilities beyond mere survival. The twins had listened to his abandoned dreams, not with pity, but with respect and genuine interest. He dropped them off at a high-end hotel downtown, which surprised him given their story about being stranded college students, but he didn't comment. Everyone deserved their privacy, and he was grateful for the brief glimpse of hope they'd given him. For the next 3 weeks, Marcus threw himself back into his routine with renewed energy. Something about the twins' encouragement had rekindled. A spark he'd thought was permanently extinguished. He found himself sketching out business plans during his lunch breaks, researching small business loans online at the library, and even reaching out to his former community college advisor about the possibility of finishing his degree, part-time. The business card sat on his kitchen counter, a small reminder of that extraordinary night, but Marcus never seriously considered using it. What would he say? "Thank you for listening to my dreams." It seemed presumptuous to contact strangers who had already done so much by simply being kind. Then, on a Thursday morning that started like any other, everything changed. Marcus was getting Emma ready for daycare when there was a knock at his door. Not the desperate knocking of that night 3 weeks ago, but a confident professional sound that immediately made him nervous. He opened the door to find a man in an expensive suit, flanked by Sophia and Isabella, both dressed in business attire. That made them look older, more sophisticated, and somehow familiar in a way that made Marcus's breath catch. "Mr. Chen," the man said, extending a manicured hand with a warm smile. "My name is David Harrison. I believe you've met my daughters." The world tilted sideways as the pieces fell into place. The expensive clothes, the sophisticated questions about business, the meaningful glances between the twins, the business card he'd barely looked at. Marcus pulled it from his pocket with trembling hands and read it for the first time. David Harrison, CEO, Harrison Global Industries. Harrison Global Industries, one of the largest logistics and distribution companies in the Pacific Northwest. A company Marcus had researched extensively during his business classes, dreaming of someday competing with their innovative approaches to supply chain management. "Your daughters," Marcus managed, his voice barely a whisper, "were not lost college students," David Harrison said gently. "They were conducting research for a new initiative I've been developing, research that led them to your neighborhood and eventually to your door." Sophia stepped forward, her professional demeanor unable to hide the warmth in her eyes. "We told our father everything, Marcus, about your kindness, your sacrifices, your business ideas and your dreams. But more importantly, we told him about your character. Dad has been looking for someone to head up a new division," Isabella added. "Someone with fresh ideas about serving small and medium-sized businesses in the logistics space. Someone who understands both the challenges and the opportunities from the ground up." David Harrison's smile widened. "Mr. Chen, I'm offering you a position as Director of Small Business Solutions for Harrison Global Industries. The salary would be sufficient to provide Emma with every opportunity she deserves and allow you to complete your education. More importantly, you'd be building the kind of company you dreamed about, just with considerably more resources than you ever imagined possible." Marcus gripped the doorframe as his knees threatened to give out. "This isn't real. This can't be happening." "It's absolutely real," David assured him. "But it's not charity, and it's not some kind of reward for being kind to my daughters. This is a legitimate business proposition based on your ideas, your potential, and yes, your character." "The night we stayed here," Sophia explained, "we weren't just making conversation. We were interviewing you, learning about your vision, your approach to problem solving, your understanding of the industry. Everything you shared convinced us that you're exactly what our new division needs. Marcus thought about that night, about how he'd opened up in ways he hadn't in years, sharing not just his circumstances, but his deepest professional dreams. He'd thought he was just talking to two sympathetic strangers. Instead, he'd been unknowingly presenting his ideas to the daughters of one of the most successful logistics entrepreneurs in the country. There's more, David continued, reaching into his briefcase. Harrison Global offers comprehensive benefits including childcare services, educational assistance, and a program that helps employee children with college preparation and scholarships. Emma would have access to opportunities most children only dream about. But why? Marcus asked, tears streaming down his face as the magnitude of what was being offered hit him. Why me? Why this? Isabella knelt down as Emma appeared in the doorway, clearly curious about the visitors, because that night, when two strangers knocked on your door asking for help, you didn't see potential problems or security risks. You saw people who needed kindness, and you gave it without hesitation, even though you had so little to give. That kind of character, David added, can't be taught. It can't be faked. And it's exactly what I want representing my company when we work with struggling small businesses who need someone who understands their challenges personally. Emma toddled over to Sophia and Isabella, who immediately crouched down to her level with the same genuine delight they'd shown weeks earlier. "Are you the twin ladies?" she asked with 3-year-old directness. "We are," Sophia said, lifting Emma into her arms, "and we've missed you so much." "We brought you something," Isabella added, pulling a small wrapped package from her purse. Inside was a book about a little girl who goes on adventures with her father, beautifully illustrated and obviously expensive. As Emma squealed with delight over her gift, Marcus found himself thinking about the man he'd been before that stormy night, before his life had fallen apart and been rebuilt around Emma's needs. That younger version of himself might have seen Sophia and Isabella as networking opportunities, as connections to be cultivated for professional gain. But the man he'd become, humbled by loss and transformed by love, had seen them simply as two young women who needed help. And in choosing compassion over calculation, kindness over caution, he'd opened a door to possibilities he never could have imagined. "There's just one condition to the job offer," David said with a grin that reminded Marcus powerfully of both his daughters. "Sunday dinners at our house are mandatory. The girls have been planning Emma's first visit for weeks, and when my daughters make up their minds about something, resistance is futile." Marcus laughed through his tears, the sound surprising him with its genuine joy. "I accept," he said, looking around at the 3 people who had just transformed his entire world. All of it. The job, the opportunities for Emma, the Sunday dinners. I accept it all. "There's one more thing," Sophia said, still holding Emma, who was already absorbed in her new book. "Dad's already spoken with the best family law attorneys in the city. If you ever want to pursue any legal matters regarding Emma's mother or future custody arrangements, you'll have the best support available." For the first time in 2 years, Marcus allowed himself to truly imagine the future. Not just survival, but thriving. Not just providing for Emma's basic needs, but giving her opportunities he'd never dared dream possible. Building not just a career, but a legacy. Creating the kind of life where kindness was rewarded, where dreams were achievable, where a single father's love for his daughter could open doors to unlimited possibilities. "You know what the most incredible part of this is," Marcus said, wiping his eyes and looking at the family that had chosen him. 3 weeks ago, I was so tired, so overwhelmed, so focused on just making it through another day. I almost didn't answer the door when you knocked, but you did. Isabella said softly. When it mattered most, when two strangers needed help, you chose to care, and that choice changed everything. Not just for you, David added, but for all of us. My daughters learned something profound about character that night. I found exactly the kind of person I want leading this new division. And you're about to discover what happens when preparation meets opportunity and kindness opens doors you never knew existed. As Marcus stood there in his modest apartment, surrounded by the family that had seen his worth in his darkest moment, he understood something profound about the nature of transformation. Success wasn't just about financial gain or professional achievement. It was about staying true to your values when it would be easier to compromise, about choosing hope when despair seems logical, about believing that kindness matters even when the world suggests otherwise. The knock that had come to his door that night hadn't just brought two lost young women seeking shelter. It had brought possibility, opportunity, and proof that sometimes the greatest blessings come disguised as inconvenience. 6 months later, Marcus stood in his corner office on the 20th floor of Harrison Global Industries, looking out at the Seattle skyline and thinking about the small business owners he was now helping every day. His division had already assisted over 50 local companies with their logistics challenges, and the satisfaction he felt went far beyond any paycheck. Emma thrived in the company's childcare center, surrounded by opportunities and friends, her bright personality flourishing in ways that filled Marcus's heart to overflowing. The little girl who had once played behind a curtain in a cramped apartment now had her own beautifully decorated bedroom in their new house. But more importantly, she had a father who was no longer just surviving, but truly living. His phone buzzed with a text from Sophia. Sunday dinner at 6. Dad's making his famous barbecue and Emma gets to help with dessert. Also, there's someone we'd like you to meet, a potential business partner for your next big idea. Marcus smiled, typing back, "Wouldn't miss it. Family dinner is everything." And it was true. Because sometimes when you open your door to strangers, in the night, you don't just offer them shelter from the storm. You invite miracles into your own life, possibilities you never imagined, and proof that kindness really does change everything. The decision to help Sophia and Isabella that night had taken maybe 30 seconds. The consequences of that choice were going to last a lifetime, rippling out through generations in ways Marcus was only beginning to understand. Because in the end, we're all just people trying to find our way through difficult times, hoping someone will see our need and choose to help. And sometimes, when we're brave enough to be that someone for others, we discover that kindness isn't just about what we give, about what we receive when we stay open to grace, to possibility, and to the extraordinary ways that love finds a way to change everything. If this story moved you the way Marcus's kindness moved Sophia and Isabella, remember to subscribe to our channel for more incredible true stories that prove compassion can transform lives. And remember, you never know when your next act of kindness might just change someone's entire world, including your own.